It was a stormy night when a mother and her young son were thrown onto the streets, their belongings soaked and scattered in the rain. But just as all hope seemed lost, a service dog slammed its paw against the truck window, refusing to look away. What that dog sensed in that moment would uncover a buried promise, expose a silent betrayal, and lead to a justice no one saw coming. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video and tell us where you're watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. The sky was heavy with clouds, and the rain came down in thick sheets. The roads glistened with water, making everything look cold and quiet. In a small, older pickup truck, Nathaniel drove slowly through the narrow streets on the edge of a coastal town. He wasn't a man of many words. After years of working as a rescue medic, he had chosen a quiet life. He lived alone in a cabin tucked away behind thick woods, far from the noise of the world. Beside him sat Misty, his silver-coated retriever mix, calm and alert. Misty was no ordinary dog. Trained to support and protect, she had a way of noticing things that others missed. Her eyes scanned the road ahead, as if she was searching for something important. The town was nearly empty. Most people stayed inside on days like this. But just as Nate turned a corner, Misty's body tensed. She let out a low whine and stood up on the seat. Her paws hit the dashboard with a soft thud, and her eyes locked on something outside. She barked once, sharp and clear, and nudged Nate's arm. Nate glanced at her, confused. "What is it, girl?" he asked. Misty barked again, more urgently this time. She pressed her nose against the window and scratched at the door. Nate had been with her long enough to know this wasn't normal. She wasn't barking for fun. This was a warning. Something was wrong. He slowed the truck and followed Misty's gaze. Through the rain, he saw it. A woman stood on the sidewalk, soaked from head to toe. Next to her, a young boy held onto her hand tightly. Their things were scattered around them: boxes, bags, clothes. A man, angry and impatient, stood nearby, shouting. He pointed toward the road, yelling at them to leave. Nate stopped the truck. He stared at the scene. The woman looked tired, beaten down by the world. Her shoulders slumped as she tried to hold herself together. The boy, no older than 6, kept his eyes on the ground. The rain soaked his thin jacket, and his small frame shivered with cold. Misty let out another bark, softer this time. Nate understood. He stepped out of the truck without a word. The rain hit him hard, but he didn't flinch. His boots splashed through puddles as he walked toward the group. The shouting man turned to him, annoyed. "Mind your business," the man snapped. Nate didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "That's enough," he said, his tone low but firm. The man hesitated. Something about Nate's posture, his steady gaze, made him step back. Without another word, the landlord stormed off, muttering under his breath. Nate turned to the woman and her son. "You're coming with me," he said. Hazel looked at him, unsure. Her eyes were wide, filled with fear and confusion. "Why?" she asked. "Because no one should be left out in this storm," he replied. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. She picked up a small bag and took her son's hand. Nate opened the passenger door, and Misty scooted aside to make space. The boy climbed in first, followed by his mother. They sat in silence as Nate started the truck and drove back into the woods. The rain continued to fall as they reached the cabin. It was small but warm. Nate led them inside and started a fire in the hearth. The boy, Noah, sat wrapped in a blanket near the flames. Hazel remained quiet, unsure of how to act. Nate didn't ask questions. He moved around the room, preparing tea and drying towels. Misty lay near the fireplace, her eyes watching Hazel closely. After a few minutes, she stood up and walked over to the woman. Hazel looked down as the dog approached. She expected a sniff, maybe a wag of the tail. Instead, Misty gently nudged the back of her hand and then rested her chin in Hazel's palm. It was a soft, familiar motion, full of meaning. Hazel froze. Nate noticed the interaction. Misty had never acted like this with strangers. She was trained to stay calm and quiet, never pushy. But now, she acted as if she had known Hazel for years. "Has she met you before?" Nate asked. Hazel shook her head. "I don't think so," she said softly. "I've never seen a dog like her." Nate looked from Hazel to Misty, then back again. Something was clicking into place, but it was too early to understand what it meant. The fire crackled in the background, filling the room with warmth. Outside, the rain showed no signs of stopping. But inside the cabin, 3 strangers and 1 remarkable dog had found shelter. What Nate didn't know yet was that this simple decision to stop the truck and help a mother and child would uncover a past he had tried to forget. Misty had sensed something more than sadness. She had recognized something hidden beneath the surface, a bond, a truth, and a promise that had waited years to be remembered. And this was only the beginning. The soft crackle of the fire was the only sound inside the cabin. Outside, the rain still poured, a steady rhythm on the metal roof. Hazel sat near the hearth, her son Noah asleep on a small couch under a heavy quilt. Misty, the silver-coated retriever, lay stretched out beside him, her head resting on her front paws. Her eyes remained fixed on Hazel. Nathaniel moved quietly through the room. He placed a mug of warm tea on the small wooden table near Hazel. She whispered a thank you, but didn't meet his eyes. Her hands wrapped tightly around the cup, as if trying to draw strength from its warmth. Nate settled in a chair across from her. The fire lit the side of his face, revealing quiet lines of age and years of service. He didn't speak. He knew people opened up when they were ready, not when pushed. Hazel finally broke the silence. "We didn't have anywhere else to go," she said, her voice soft and hoarse. "My husband, Liam, passed away 3 years ago. Everything's been hard since then." Nate nodded slowly. "Was he military?" Hazel looked up at him, surprised. "Yes, he was." Community outreach. He helped veterans returning home, helped them settle into normal life. He cared a lot. Misty raised her head slightly at the name. Her ears perked. Nate noticed. "Liam," Nate repeated, his brow furrowed. "I think I met someone by that name, years ago. He helped at a base hospital once. Friendly guy. Talked about his family all the time." Hazel gave a small smile. "That sounds like him." Misty stood and walked to Hazel again. She placed her chin gently in Hazel's hand, repeating the gesture she had made earlier. Hazel looked down, touched by the strange affection. She petted Misty gently. "She keeps doing that," Hazel said. "It's like she knows me." Nate leaned forward. "That move, her putting her chin in your hand, that's not something she does for anyone, ever." Hazel looked confused. "But why me?" Nate's eyes searched Misty's face. "That behavior? It was taught. Liam once had a dog at the base. I remember now. He trained him to do that exact thing." Hazel froze. Her hand stopped moving. "Are you saying Misty knew him?" "Maybe not Misty herself," Nate said carefully, "but maybe she learned it from someone who did. Dogs are strange that way. They remember things that seem impossible." The room was quiet again. Hazel stared at the fire, her thoughts racing. Finally, she spoke. "After Liam died, things got complicated. His brother, Riley, offered to help. Said he'd handle the insurance and savings. Told me he would manage everything until I could get back on my feet." Nate's expression darkened slightly. "At first, It was fine, she continued. But then the money started to disappear. He said things were delayed, or that expenses had come up. I trusted him. He was family. She paused and took a shaky breath. Months passed. Then the eviction notices started. I called him, begged him to explain. He stopped answering. I didn't know what to do. Nate remained still, listening closely. I felt like I had failed Liam, she whispered. He died trying to give our son a future, and I let someone take that away. Misty pressed closer, laying her head in Hazel's lap. Hazel let her tears fall freely now, her hand resting gently on the dog's soft fur. Hazel looked at Misty, then back at Nate. So this means? It means something important, Nate replied. Maybe Misty remembers him. Maybe she remembers the bond. The fire crackled louder, as if marking the moment. You and Noah can stay here for now, Nate said, breaking the quiet. We'll figure out the rest. Hazel nodded, her expression still dazed but grateful. Thank you. Nate looked at Misty, who now rested peacefully beside Noah. You're not alone anymore, he said, and we're going to get back what was taken. In the soft glow of the fire, the threads of the past began to reconnect. It wasn't just about loss anymore. It was about finding truth, and maybe, just maybe, healing. The wind had settled, and the rain gave way to a quiet morning fog. Sunlight pushed gently through the trees surrounding Nate's cabin, casting long shadows across the porch. Inside, Hazel and Noah sat at the breakfast table, sharing a quiet meal. It had been a peaceful night, the first in a long time, but both knew peace didn't last without action. Nate stood near the window, phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low, but firm. He spoke with someone he trusted, Paulina, an old friend from his rescue medic days, now working in legal aid for veterans and their families. When he hung up, he turned to Hazel. There's someone who can help, he said. She's a legal advisor, experienced, smart, and she's done this before. Hazel looked hopeful, but unsure. What can she do if we don't have proof? She said she needs documents, Nate replied. Bank records, agreements, anything that shows Riley was managing your finances. Hazel's face fell. I told you, Nate. It's all gone. Every time we moved, things were lost. I don't even remember what was packed anymore. Nate nodded. I understand. But we still have one place to check. A few hours later, Nate's truck pulled into the gravel lot of a small storage facility. The air smelled of dust and old metal. Hazel stepped out slowly, looking around with heavy eyes. This place held the last of her belongings, boxes from 3 moves ago. The things she hadn't had the heart to go through. Inside the unit, the scene was bleak. Broken picture frames, an old stroller, and a few taped cardboard boxes sat in the dim light. Hazel sobbed. I haven't opened these in years. Nate, ever calm, rolled up his sleeves. Then, let's start now. They worked together, opening box after box. Most held clothes, baby items, and books. The minutes stretched into an hour. Dust filled the air, and hope began to fade. Hazel sat on an overturned crate, wiping her hands on her jeans. I told you it wasn't here. Nate didn't respond. He scanned the small unit one more time. In the far corner, half covered by a folded chair, sat one more box. It was worn, water-stained, and barely held together. Hazel noticed it and sighed. That one's junk. I remember. Old baby clothes and torn photos. Nothing useful. As Nate moved toward it, Misty suddenly perked up. She had stayed near the truck until now, but something about the box caught her attention. She trotted inside, tail stiff, ears forward. Her nose twitched as she sniffed the air. Then, without hesitation, she placed herself directly in front of the box and let out a single, sharp bark. Nate stopped. Hazel looked confused. "What is she doing?" "She's found something," Nate said softly. Misty barked again and nudged the box with her nose. Then she looked back at Nate, her eyes focused and alert. "Trust her," Nate said. Kneeling Bessie, he carefully peeled back the old tape and opened the flaps. Inside, just as Hazel had said, were soft baby clothes and some old photo albums. But beneath them, wrapped in a faded towel, was a thick manila envelope. Hazel gasped. "What is that?" Nate opened it slowly. Inside were documents, legal forms, financial records, and printed emails. He scanned them quickly. "This is it," he said. "These are the original agreements. Riley's signature, bank statements showing transfers, everything." Hazel's eyes filled with tears. "I thought they were gone." "They almost were," Nate said, but Misty knew better. He looked down at the dog, who now sat quietly, mission complete. Her eyes remained steady, watching Hazel with quiet satisfaction. Later that evening, back at the cabin, Nate called Paulina. He read off details from the papers, confirming everything she needed. Paulina's voice was calm and clear. "This is enough. We can build a strong case with this." Hazel sat in silence, overwhelmed by what had just happened. "I still can't believe she found it," she whispered, looking at Misty. Nate sat beside her. "She's not just a companion. She's a guide. She knew this was important." Noah, now awake and playing quietly with a wooden truck near the fireplace, looked up. "Is Misty magic?" Hazel smiled. "Maybe she is, sweetie." But Nate didn't think it was magic. He believed it was instinct, loyalty, and something deeper, an unspoken connection between the past and present. Misty had sensed more than just missing papers. She had sensed a mission unfinished. That night, as the fire crackled once more, Nate sat by the window with a cup of tea. Hazel tucked Noah into bed, and Misty lay curled at the boy's feet. Nate thought about everything that had happened, about Liam, about the promise of a better life, and about the strange way life had brought them all together. The courtroom was quiet as Hazel sat beside her lawyer, Paulina. The man across the room, Riley, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. For months, he had avoided consequences. For years, he had lived off money that didn't belong to him. But now, everything had changed. On the table in front of Paulina were the documents Misty had helped uncover. Legal papers, signed agreements, financial records, all proving that Liam's life insurance and savings had been misused. Paulina stood confidently, presenting the evidence with calm authority. Hazel sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap. She glanced over at Nate, who gave her a slight nod of reassurance. Misty lay quietly by his side, eyes closed but alert. Even in the stillness of the courtroom, her presence felt strong and steady. The judge reviewed the documents carefully. When he finally spoke, his voice was firm and clear. The court ruled in Hazel's favor. Riley was ordered to return a large portion of the funds and was barred from contacting Hazel or her son again. Hazel's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of relief. Nate reached over and gently patted her hand. Beside them, Misty gave a soft sigh, as if sensing the weight that had finally lifted. After the case, things moved quickly. With the recovered money, Hazel was able to secure a small apartment in a safe neighborhood. Members of the local veteran community came together to help. They brought furniture, carried boxes, and helped paint the walls. Noah ran from room to room, laughing, his voice full of joy. On the day they moved in, Nate and Misty arrived with a box of supplies and a warm homemade meal. Hazel greeted them with a smile that reached her eyes. Her face, once marked by stress and fear, now held peace. "Come in," she said. "This is your home too." Inside, the apartment was bright. Sunlight streamed through the windows. Pictures of Liam now hung on the wall, a reminder of the man who had brought them all together, even from beyond. Noah sat on the living room floor, building towers with blocks. Misty lay beside him, her tail wagging gently. The bond between the boy and the dog had grown quickly. They were inseparable now. Nate watched them play. He sipped his coffee, quietly observing the laughter and life filling the space. It had been a long time since he had seen such warmth. Years of solitude had taught him how to survive, but this moment reminded him what it meant to truly live. Hazel joined him at the table. "I never thought we'd get here," she said softly. "You did more than survive," Nate replied. "You held on, and when the time came, you fought." She looked down at Misty. "I couldn't have done it without her." "Neither could I," Nate said. He told her more about his past, about the rescues he had done, the people he couldn't save, and the promises he had carried silently for years. He spoke about Liam, the brief but powerful connection they had made on the field, and about how he had always felt that there was something left unfinished. "I think Misty felt it too," he said. "She was the one who knew. She was the one who found you." Hazel nodded. Maybe it was Liam's way of keeping his promise. Nate smiled, not disagreeing. A few weeks later, Hazel received a letter from the organization Liam had once worked with. They had heard about the case and wanted to share his story. They wanted others to know how one man's kindness, one woman's strength, and one dog's loyalty had changed everything. The story spread, and messages began to come in from others who had faced betrayal, loss, and struggle. Hazel replied to everyone, offering words of hope and strength. She never saw herself as a hero, but her honesty and courage gave others the strength to speak up too. Misty became more than just a service dog. She was a symbol. People began referring to her as the dog who kept a promise, the one who guided a family back to safety. Wherever she went, people smiled, recognizing her as the quiet force behind the story. For Nate, the journey had changed him as well. He returned to his cabin less often now, spending more time in town, helping at the local shelter, mentoring young veterans, and offering his quiet strength to those in need. On the anniversary of the day Misty found the documents, they gathered in Hazel's apartment. The room was filled with laughter, the smell of food, and stories shared between friends. Nate stood by the window, looking out at the setting sun. Hazel walked over and handed him a photo. It showed Noah sitting beside Misty, her head resting on his shoulder. "This one's our favorite," she said. Nate looked at it and smiled. He'll grow up knowing he was never alone, and that his father's promise was never forgotten, she added. Nate placed the photo on the shelf beside others. Misty walked over and pressed her head gently into his hand. He looked down at her, eyes full of quiet pride. "We did it," he whispered. The promise wasn't fulfilled by one person. It was carried by many. A soldier's memory, a mother's strength, a boy's hope, and a dog's silent loyalty. They all played a part. And in that small apartment, filled with light and peace, the echoes of that promise lived on.